Welcome to the Ronald Wilsher Show, where we comfort the disturbed and we disturb the comfortable. Think we're live, or is that live, Bob?
Your preference.
Well, welcome to the Ronald Wilsher Show, the premiere version. So this may change in the future, but this one will be worth the most, I'm thinking, Bob. You think?
I believe this will be a collector's item.
So I want to welcome everybody. I've got a guest with me. You know, everybody says special guest. I'm like, so I want to announce Bob as just a guest, so you'll be different.
Works for me.
Everybody's special guest. So what we're going to do today, Bob, welcome.
They say if everybody's special, then no one is, right?
Exactly. If everybody can have it, nobody wants it, right? So what we're going to do today, we're going to take a little while. And what I want to do is when I started this podcast, you know, I have another podcast that I do, Inside Houston Real Estate with Mark and Craig. But I did about 10, 12 years ago, I did several versions. I did about 18 or 20 podcast, and of course my attention span wouldn't let me keep doing it. I should have, but anyway, what I want to do is sit down with Bob. I met Bob, I guess, I don't know, when did we meet, Bob?
Oh, wow. It's been at least 10 years, maybe more. I know we started going to the lunch bunch.
I remember that in Katy.
When I first started in business, and that was at least 10 years ago. I've been in business 11 years as far as not necessarily illustrating, but my other business. And so
Well, you've been a drawer a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I've been a drawer a long time.
Well, the reason I wanted to bring Bob on and share y'all's story with me, he has an amazing story. He's an illustrator, and are you still doing your window cleaning or not?
Very little.
Very little window cleaning, but he's doing it's Bob Dahl Studios, and he also has a book that we'll be talking about. But I've always liked his story, and I've liked and I said, you know, when I start my podcast back up, I want to get him on, and I just want everybody to hear his story. So what I want you to do, Bob, if you will, is just tell everybody who you are, how long you've been in Houston, a little bit about yourself, your family, how you got into doing what you're doing.
Well, the first two parts of that question were easy. How I got this way is a different story, but
that may take a little longer to explain.
Moved here from Houston, from Memphis, Tennessee in '79. Went to Stratford High School, got accepted to Houston Baptist University, where I dropped out, joined the Marine Corps. As soon as I got out of the Marine Corps, I started working, got married, had a couple of kids. The marriage didn't work out, and went back to school for a little while, found the love of my life, got married again. She's the best. And right now we live in Katy. We have lots of children and grandchildren. All the kids are grown. The grandchildren are still small, so we're enjoying them out in Katy.
What is her name?
Tracy.
What does she do?
Right now, she's kind of like me, not doing anything.
Besides tolerating you.
Yeah. Ever since I stopped doing the window washing, I've been spending a lot more time at home, and it's driving her crazy.
Well, so tell us about one of the things that you told me when you were in the service. Tell us a little bit about that, and then we can kind of go into your illustrating and what you do with that.
Yeah, well, I joined the Marine Corps. I dropped out of college, joined the Marine Corps. You couldn't have written a better script than that. There's lots of stories to tell about that. It was a pretty wild ride, and I won't share most of it with you. A lot of it's very, pretty close to home with me, and many of the stories I only share with the men I served with. But yeah, there a lot of good times came out of that. A lot of trials and tough times, but it it oh it was a hit. It was a wild ride. That's all I can say. It was a scene, man.
Well, one of the things you told me that I was, highly impressed with, I'm not easy to impress, but you were some kinda shooter.
Yeah. Yeah, I got company high shooter in boot camp, and I took great pride in that. That's one of my greatest accomplishments. And they were urging me to be a sniper, go to sniper school. But unfortunately, I couldn't get approved for that because of my eyesight. I was even then I was wearing glasses, so that was one of the disqualifiers. But I was always one of the best shooters in every unit I was with.
Well, didn't you tell me you got, like, 3 perfect scores or something in a
Yeah,
row?
yeah. Three-time expert rifle, company high shooter each time. So
Wow, that's impressive to me because 'cause I'm kinda like you, I was born with not the best eyesight, and so anytime I hear something like that so from the very first time I met you, I let everybody know that if there's any trouble breaks out and you wanna find me, I will be behind Bob. That's if you're looking for me, but anyway, so tell me how did that when did you start drawing? Because some of the illustrations that you do and some of the I guess now's a good time to mention your book, Shut Up and Draw. How did you develop that I guess the desire to draw, and then how long did it take you to get good? And because I'm sure you weren't expert right at the very beginning.
right. Well, yeah. As far as drawing, generally, most kids, most children love to draw, and as children age and get older, they find other interests that they pursue. Well, with me, it just kind of stuck with me. The drawing I continued to do, and I hung out with friends who also knew how to draw and were very creative at whatever they did. And I remember one friend in particular in seventh grade. His name was Morgan Schmidt, and I've been trying to look him up ever since the internet made the scene. Morgan Schmidt, me and him were buddies, and he was extremely creative. He influenced me a lot in how he drew. And as time went on, I've always liked to draw and write. Uh, and as a kid, circumstances being the way they were, it was conducive for me to be a more of a reflective type of kid, a kid that liked to kind of preferred to be alone a lot. And I read a lot because of that. There was a time we didn't even have a TV. Well, being brought up by a single mother in the 70s, back then they had it really harder than they do now. And so we didn't have a lot. And one of the most formative years in my life was the time we didn't have a television in the house, because that way I turned to reading a lot, uh, tried my hand at writing some, and I even started my own comic strip. That's when I was drawing a lot as well. I even started my own comic strip. I was just a kid.
How old were you then?
Oh shoot, that was I was probably fifth or sixth grade.
So you were
70.
probably 12 or 13.
Yeah, yeah, that's about it. I remember in 74 or 75, right before junior high school, is when me and a friend got together and we created our own comic strip. It was called Salt Shaker.
Do you still have it around, or have you
No,
ever
no,
thought of
no.
bringing it back? Or
Those it was styled after Charlie Brown, the Charlie Brown comic strip, because he was one of my favorite. I really love Charles Schultz, Charlie Brown gang, and so I styled it after that. It wasn't very original, but of course I was only about 12. So what can you
well,
expect?
the fact that you just did it, and I think probably looking back, would you say that influenced a lot of? Well, I don't know about influencing, but maybe gave you the desire to develop your talent more.
That's a very interesting question, because at that young age, it was the genesis, I think, because like I said, it was at a time when I was alone a lot, and I was reading some books that were, even if I say so myself, were beyond my years. At the age of 12, 13, and 14, I was reading novels. And so I did have this creative little seed in my brain from the get go. And so I took my love of a good story and I would combine writing with the comic strip that I created, and I think I found something I could go with. So that's how
Well,
that started.
Bob, I've told you this before, because when you say that you didn't have a TV and that kind of like was a good thing looking back, I can highly relate to that because as you know, and some of my friends know, I was raised in a cult, and we didn't believe in TVs.
Okay.
Uh, and so I read a lot, and because a lot of people always ask me, "How do you know all this stuff?" This all I said, "Well," and even to this day, I sold both of my TVs 7 years ago. I don't watch TV, so I think looking back, you can say that not having a TV was a really a gift.
Yeah, it was. Like I said, it was not having a TV in the house was it was an introspective time where I had to find something within myself to that would allow me to find something that wasn't readily available. Like on the TV, they kind of even today, back then and today, they kind of tell you what to think, what to believe,
You think?
what you want, what to buy. So that being not a part of that young life of mine, I was able to kind of build my own personality, and it kind of lingered even through all my adult years.
Well, and that's one of the things that ever since I met you that I liked is, I a lot of people know I have a book titled Miscellaneous Ramblings from a Slightly Deranged Mind and has all these little sayings that I made up in it. But when I met you, it's like you had all these really cool sayings, but you had the talent to make all these little cartoons and drawings with them and illustrations. And I'm like, man, this should go in a book, right? And so you remember, kind of tell us how that came about and then show us your book if you have a copy with you.
Yeah, this is the book, Shut Up and Draw.
And it's available on Amazon.
It's available on Amazon. We'll leave that in the description. The subtitle is A Journey to Creativity. But this is what it is in its current form. It's roughly 200 pages. Uh, and yeah. And having a lot of conversations with you, yeah, well, it helped. Of course, everybody wants to write a book.
Right.
Everybody wants to write a book, but
Very
only
few do, but
very few do. And so, being not just you, but the other crowd I hung around with, there's one thing I read somewhere, and I was going to repeat it is if you have the right choice of friends, the world is at your feet. Having the right choice of friends, not just one, but they say you're the total of your five closest friends, right?
right.
You're like you take a part of all of them. And I know some people like me have a hard time in even naming five friends, but then so but the idea is that the your closest friends will help you. They will lift you up, and that's what this book is all about. Really, not only did you and the rest of my group encourage me to put these drawings and it's a little autobiographical, put it in book form, uh, accompanied by just droves of humorous illustrations, and it's a little autobiographical in that from my perspective, I take what I was programmed to believe early in life, which is get a job, do what you're told, do what your boss says, pay your bills, do what you're supposed to do. And I believe that for most of my adult life. And
You
as a
believe the
result,
lie. You bought into it.
yeah, I bought into it. I believed it. I was brainwashed, programmed, I
Most
like to
of us
call it.
did.
And then I realized after a long time, well, I don't have to. That really has made me kind of miserable, unhappy. I don't like that.
I bought the bill of goods.
Yeah, I bought a bill of goods. It was snake oil, and so I decided that yeah, I can do what I want to do. I can do what I love to do, which is mainly draw and write, combining the two. And I'm still a work in progress. I'm a long way. I'm many miles from my destination, but as far as doing what I like, that part I'm doing well.
Well, you mentioned that you're the sum of the five people you hang around. I have in my book, it says that they say you should hang around people that are smarter than you, but I don't think they understand how difficult that is for me to do. So, but no, I think it's when I met you. Of course, we didn't talk about a book or anything, but this just happened what in the last couple of years. But as soon as you talked about writing a book, and I'm like, Bob, you can write a book. And then when you came up with that title, "Shut Up and Draw," I love that. I mean, it just
I'll tell
fits
you, it's
everything you do.
I don't know that it's a direct quote from my wife Tracy, but it pretty much it sums up everything she was telling me. Bob, you shut up and draw. You're talking about it too much. You keep saying you're going to write a book, but you never do. Just shut up and draw and write the book. And a direct quote from her, I wrote it down when she said it. Was
Smart.
was she said one night? This was before I wrote the book. She said to me, Bob, if you were to write a book starting now, it'd be done by dinner time. And I didn't know what she meant at first. And I thought about it and I thought, well, okay, what she means is that I've already got everything I need for the book. Just throw it together
Put
and
it
it's done.
together. Well, that's what really impressed me when we started talking about it. I'm like, Bob, you have what everybody is always wanting, and that's content. Because people always ask me, when I tell them to build an email list, build a texting list, what do I send out to my list? And I'm like, Bob, he already was endowed with from his creator with all this talent, and he can draw something new every day if he wants to, in 10 minutes. So, but you mentioned that you have the drawings, but then you kind of like to write. And I always kind of liked your style of writing because I guess it kind of reminds me of mine, kind of, I don't know what you call it, irreverent, but not real irreverent, and just in your face, but funny stuff. And I'm like, man, he should put that stuff in a book.
You know, many of the things that I do write gags about, jokes about in my illustrations are sometimes sarcastic, and a lot of people say it's got a little negative spin on it and all that. But I'm thinking, yeah, maybe they're right. Maybe it is negative. Maybe sometimes it can be a little sarcastic, but I've gotten such a positive response from people who say things like, I feel exactly the same way, or you hit it right on the head, Bob, with that drawing. It's hilarious. I love it because the face that we like to put on in public is one where everything is all hunky dory and we got everything is going right for us. And on social media, we got the best family. We go on the greatest vacations. We live in the best house. When in reality, most
It ain't that
people
great.
when in reality you've got family problems, you've got money problems, and some people suffer from uh, depression and anxiety, and some people suffer from just being generally unhappy about what they're going through. Or so that's the kind of thing I like to address, because isn't putting a humorous spin, not necessarily a positive spin, but a humorous spin on some of the things we struggle with. Doesn't that sort of help you through it? Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
it
so. It
does,
helps
and
me.
Bob, you know what they call that? They call that life, right?
Yeah.
That's life. So it's, I don't know if you remember the big old fat comedian Louis Anderson.
Oh yeah,
He
he's one of
said,
my favorites.
he talked about all these crazy people. And he said, a lot of people don't like to admit they got crazy people in their family. He said, but they're coming from somewhere. And, I'm like, I got a lot of them in my family. I got a disproportionate number, a high number. But no, it's, I also have in my book, it says we all have issues. It's just the enlightened among us choose not to carry it on our shoulder or wear it on our sleeve. We're all screwed up in some way. And I get that a lot with my stuff that I do, is people say, that really sums it up what you just said. I like that because I think you're the same as me. We say what people are thinking, and a lot of times they don't have the courage to say it, but we say it for them.
Yeah, and adding those humorous illustrations with it just makes it. It's like sprinkles on a donut. The Most people are visual. That's why we have signs that are, the street signs that we see usually are visual. The TV is visual. Everything most people respond better to vision than if you were to look at a book and see a paragraph there with a picture next to it. You're going to look at the picture first, right?
Absolutely.
So if you have something to say along with a funny illustration or even any illustration, you're going to get a better response.
Well, and Bob, you're exactly right because I always tell people we think in pictures, right? If I say red Corvette, you don't think REDCO. No, you picture a red Corvette. I mean, even in the Bible, they called it what God called it parables, right? So the pictures that you draw, I think, give the words that much more power, and I think that's part of your talent. I mean, I've always been impressed by it, and I think it's something that I've told you almost since the beginning you should share with the world because it's funny. I mean, I have a very weird sense of humor, but it's highly evolved. So some people don't get it, but I've just a lot of the things that you say and that you send in text and you send out in your email and stuff. I'm like, man, that's funny. So tell us what are you doing now and what direction are you going and what do you got going and where do you hope to be? And I mean, tell us a little bit about now and what's happening.
Most weekends are my work days. I will usually attend certain events like maybe trade shows or weddings or parties. And just recently I went to the Houston Astros opening day. What I do there is draw caricatures of the party goers. That was my phone. I apologize. Um,
What are your fans wanting your attention, Bob? I
I can't
understand.
get away from them. The attendees to the whatever event it is, they'll just sit down in front of me, and I have a drawing board there. I'll draw their caricature, draw them in a cartoon form. Basically, is what that is, and that's my biggest income for now.
Well, and I've seen a lot, and every time I see you post stuff online, I'm like, man, that looks just like them. I mean, I know a lot of illustrators, cartoonists, whatever you want to say, but I think, and I wouldn't say this if it wasn't true, but I think you're probably the most talented one that I know.
Well,
And
thanks.
that's you're welcome. I wanted you to go back though. Well, two things. Number one, what time in your life when you said, I want to do this for a living. I really want to do this because I love doing it, the drawing, because a lot of us doodle when we're younger, right? And I actually used to draw and I've drawn some pretty cool stuff, but I never thought I want to just sit down and do that. What made you, do you remember a time when you said, man, this is what I want to do?
Yeah, I can remember the time, and like I said, as I was in my adult life, I usually had jobs that I just did not like. There were just a means to an end, and it kind of coincided with the coming of the internet. When I was exposed to other artists, caricature artists in particular, and I saw these guys were making a living, and that's all they were doing was drawing. I even know people like that today who
Well,
they
and so
never.
let me guess, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but let me guess you saw some of them and you went, man, I can draw better than that.
Well, it's not.
I've done that before, not drawing, but
I've
on
done
other
that
things.
before. I've never actually said. Well, there have been a few times. Okay, that's another story. But I would see some of these guys on their websites. This was back before social media took off. It was mostly websites, and I would
Right,
look up these artists who did caricatures for a living,
right.
and that's all they did. And they were making more money than I, working a 9 to 5 job. And yet, back to yeah, I can draw better than that. Yeah, there are people out there that were banking it that I thought, how are they even making money doing that?
That can't even draw.
I know I can draw better than that. So, and so that just goes to show that you don't have to be Michelangelo to create artwork or something, anything for that matter, that you can turn into a commercial enterprise.
Well, Bob, and we've talked about this in our mastermind on Wednesday. We meet at the little barbecue place over in 99 and I-10 on Wednesday mornings at 8:30 if y'all want to join us. But we have a little mastermind afterwards, and we've talked about this. You talk about those people that aren't that good at whatever they're doing, but I've always admired those kind of people because at least they're doing it,
They're
right?
actually doing something. They
They're
they they know they may not. I know I'm not the best. I'm not even the best at what I know I could be doing. And that's another thing that I address in the book. If you are comfortable with what you're doing, you're probably doing it wrong.
right, because you're not there where you need to be.
For anyone to really learn their full potential or to live their full potential, which I'm not yet, I'm not even close, then we have to get out of our easy chair. We have to get out of that comfort zone and make mistakes, look stupid sometimes, feel like feel that old imposter syndrome creeping up. And that's required. That's almost like if you don't feel that way, then yeah, you are doing something wrong.
Well, because Bob, it's like now with this podcast. I've been putting this off to start this for 2 months because I have a friend, Mark Zachary, that does a podcast. He interviews all the top producing realtors in Houston, real estate pros of Houston, and I think he's done like 19 or 20 podcasts. And I keep saying, he keeps telling me, when are you going to start yours? When are you going to start yours? And it's like, man, I got to get this and I got to get that, and I got
Yeah.
no. You don't do that. I said, Bob, you're going to come over here. We're going to do a podcast. It probably won't be as good as the next one or the next one, but at least we're going to do it. And, I have in my book, done is better than perfect. You can correct something, you can't correct nothing. So I think that's a very good point that, you're never going to have all your ducks in a row. But the only way you do get your ducks in a row is, you don't have the mama duck go, okay, it's time to go somewhere. She takes all her little ducks and she starts putting them in a row. Okay, they're all in a row now. Let's go. No, she takes off, right? And pretty soon all the little ducks start lining up, right? So you got to action, as Ogmandino said, action alone will determine your value in the marketplace. And so that was another thing that I think you kind of skipped over about your book, because you said you'd been wanting to write a book, and there's a lot of people that want to write a book. But what was it that you finally did it? You finally actually put it in a book, and it's a really good book. And you actually have your second edition now.
Yeah, that one I showed you is the second edition. What finally got me to do it? What urgings from
Right.
you and from Tracy?
Whoever.
You can draw, Bob. That sort of thing. And, and yeah, I had this terrible habit of my whole life of doing a lot of talk without actually following up on it. And I think to a certain extent, everybody has that. But in my case, I thought, well, you know what? This is an opportunity for me to do something that most everybody wants to do, and I've always wanted to do, but I've never done. Let's do it. I mean, with the way things are today, Amazon publishing, you can self-publish a book and put it out there, and it's something for people to look at, enjoy. I've even got a nook in the process, and something I haven't spoken about much is that Shut Up and Draw is even. I've caught the interest of a publisher, a bona fide publisher, and they're considering even putting it in bookstores and gift shops and that sort of thing, which is something I never anticipated. But there is some talk about that. They have contacted me about doing that, and we'll see where that goes. And so this wouldn't it be great? Is that after we
Yes.
pass away, after we've crossed over the Jordan into the promised land, we leave something behind. Most people leave behind, maybe money, a house, a car, but this is something that, well, I would like to leave that stuff too, of course, but I want these books that I write and all the illustrations and drawings that I put out, sort of footprints,
Well,
Things I left behind.
and Bob, I think it's a great point. I always tell people it's one of the reasons I wrote my book because I have a very short attention span, and it's hard to get me cornered. But there's this one particular beautiful blonde that had a big uh, she was the main reason I did it, but exactly. I mainly did it for my son, and now I have 2 grandsons, John and Luke, and I think, how cool would have been if my dad would have wrote me a book, you
Yeah,
know? And so I think it's a great point that do it for posterity, do it for the people coming after you that they can look back on it and say, that Bob was a pretty cool dude. Look at all this stuff that he did.
that's true. I think about my grandkids after they're grown up, and they might have a copy of this book on their shelf just as a heirloom or something, but at least it's got information in there they can read, and maybe it can help them through some of the times that they have facing them in the future. You never know. It's
And
great.
and Bob, it just there's a chance that may never happen, but even if there's a chance and that happened, that would be worth doing it, you know? Because you never know. That was my whole deal when I wrote my book and these little sound bites that I have is very similar to what you've done. It's like if you can help just one person, if they read that or they look at one of your cartoons and you help them through the day or you gave them a little different or a little better mindset, it would be worth doing, you know? And like you said, there's no excuse now because there's no gatekeepers, there's no capital barrier. I mean,
That's true.
used to get what you have right now or get my book, we would have had to have a publisher, we'd had to put up a lot of money, did all kinds of stuff, right? Well, now we don't even have to do that. So there really is no excuse,
There
you
is
know?
none. And I've mentioned Dan Miller, who has his own podcast. He's sort of a virtual mentor of mine. He has a podcast called the 48 Days Podcast. He's kind of a virtual mentor of mine, and right before this book was published, I wrote him and told him about it. And as soon as it got published, what did he do? He went out and he went on Amazon and bought it, and he mentioned it on his podcast, which has where you'll be one day millions of subscribers. I can't tell you how thrilled I was to hear that. I
And
tell you,
all because, Bob, you actually went and did something,
that's true,
right?
exactly, and that's the point. Is that if I never wrote the book, if I never wrote a letter to Dan Miller, uh, if I never decided to start my own comic strip when I was 12 years old, if if I didn't if I don't go to these trade shows or weddings or birthday parties or Astros parties to sit in front of hundreds of people while they stand over my shoulder and watch every move I make, if I didn't do that, none of this would have happened. And like I said, many miles to go before I sleep, but it's better than just sitting on my hands in my easy chair watching the Today Show or something. So
Yeah, and like I say, and I've told you this before, that I admire you the most that you actually went and did it when most people only talk. And so one of my goals with this podcast as I get into this and learn what the heck I'm doing and what's going on is I want people to listen to this and if they can get one thing out of the podcast that helps them through their day or gives them some confidence to let them know that they can do it, that they have the ability to possess what they desire, that they really are good enough to do it, right? That's what I want out of it because I love hearing people's stories like yours and how you came up and what all the things that you've went through. And I'm like, man, if I could draw like that, I would be dangerous, you know? And I think a lot of times people they take for granted their gift, you know? And so I wanted to tell you, I guess we're 30 something minutes. Can you believe that already?
has it
Um,
been?
what I want to do is there anything before we tell people how to get a hold of you and everything, and we'll put all that stuff down in the description. But what is the one thing if you could leave somebody that's listening to this podcast today? what's one thing that you could tell them that you would hopefully help them get out of a tight spot, or they're feeling down, or they're feeling like they're stuck, or what's something that you would leave them with?
If that person was sitting right here across the table from me and he told me that, I would tell him that there is nothing that he has to do. If he feels like that he can't do something, well, he's wrong. He's bought, like we said earlier, he's bought some snake oil, and just to get out of his comfort zone, or hers, get out of his or her comfort zone and just do what you want to do. Even if it's not something that you can make a living doing, if you want to do something that makes you happy, then do it. Whether it's, remember, uh, the guy from the news that said, whether it's golf or tennis, do whatever makes you happy.
That was that the dude for the best little whorehouse in Texas?
Marvin,
Marvin Zinner, that was him.
that was him.
Golf or whatever makes you happy. I
Whatever
love
makes you
Marvin
happy.
Zindler.
Just do whatever you do. If it's wood carving, if it's crocheting, if it's being a school teacher, if it's being a mother, being a father, being a parent, being a business person, a salesperson, a shoe shine boy, a welder, whatever it is that you want to do, just
Do
do
it.
that. Just do that,
Well, it's
or at
fun.
least just start doing that. Nike, as we know, has that mantra: "Just do it." I
Right?
think what works better for me is just start it. Do
Yeah, just
something
start.
that you can do with. Make a list, and if it has something you can do in the next 5 minutes, you've got a good list.
Well, it's like we talk about in our mastermind is, and I mentioned this uh, earlier, you can correct something, you can't correct nothing.
True.
But I think when going back to your book, and it's like, Bob, open up a Word doc, put all those drawings in there, name it, and now you got something, right? Now you started. And I think what happens once you start, action creates energy, right? And once you start, now you have something to work on, right?
Yeah, that's true.
The most talented sculptor is rendered impotent without first a stone, right?
Yeah,
We got to have something to do, and once we get going, there's no telling where it might lead to.
that's
Just like
true.
I may be interviewing the next world famous best-selling author,
You bet.
right? You never know.
You never know.
And
There's a
so,
book written by Neil Fiore, Dr. Neil Fiore, who's a psychologist, called The Now Habit. I wrote it. I read that book it was about 5 years ago, and I've read it twice already. And he talks about that. Is that if you just start something, even just set a goal. I'm going to do, say, my taxes. I'm going to do my taxes for the next 5 minutes. Well, 45 minutes later, you're still doing them and they're almost done. And that was just an illustration that he uses, that if you just start something, even if you set a goal for 5 minutes, even if he used a good illustration that if you decide that if you're 100 pounds overweight and you want to lose 100 pounds, set a goal for putting on your running shoes and your running shorts, walk outside the door, turn around, lock the door, and then turn around and go back in. That's starting something.
you're telling your subconscious, right? Something that you started. Now you have something to correct or something to improve on. But if you never
Right.
start, you have nothing, right? I remember my book. It was similar to yours many years ago, and I had all these little sayings, but I never would sit down and put them in order because that required me being still, and But I think one of the things, it's like Seneca said, we suffer more in imagination than we do in reality. I think we try to figure everything out up front before we do something, right? And a lot of times, I put out a video yesterday. Stop thinking about people who aren't thinking about you, what they think about you, and stop trying to solve problems that may never need to be solved. Right. So if you just start, you never know. You may not even come upon that obstacle. It was only in your mind.
True. Yeah, obstacles are in the mind. And yeah, so to answer your question, if I was to tell somebody, The best advice I can give them is just start something, and if it makes you uncomfortable, you're on the right track.
Amen. Well, listen, we're going to close it down and definitely have to have you back maybe when I figure out more what the hell I'm doing with this. But I enjoyed talking to you. I always
No,
do. And, I like how you run our little Wednesday meeting because you always bring something up there to get me to think, you know. And I've always told people that I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'm here to get you to use your brain and think for yourself, you know.
yes,
And so
absolutely.
you do that with me, and I appreciate that. So tell everybody how they can get a hold of you. I know we've got Bob Doll Studios scrolling across the bottom,
Yeah,
and
you
your
got my
number.
phone number there. You can also contact me through email, bob@bobdoll.com. You can also go to my website, which is bobdoll.weebly.com. And also on that website, you can see some of my other endeavors as far as Bob Doll Studios is concerned. So those are the best ways to get in contact with me is through phone or email or just go to my website.
Well, I wanna thank you for coming on and being my inaugural guest for the what is today
Great,
the
great
Ronald Earl
show.
Wilshire Show.
Great show. Good start.
But it may be we may name it something else differently later on, but that's the only one I could think of to start today. So thank you for joining me, and I definitely have to have you back and do another one, and we'll go from there. But I appreciate it, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for coming on.
Looking forward to it. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.